Today we've got a special guest, Andrew Scott. As mentioned, Andrew's got a lot of experience in the restaurant industry. He has his own company that helps restaurants with a lot of things. I'll let him do like an official explanation of what he does. But today he's going to be sharing some actionable steps you guys can use to lower your operating costs, lower your labor costs, lower your food costs, so you just take home more profit at the end of the day. So, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. I hope I nailed that introduction. You can go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely. All right, guys, welcome. I'm just going to keep an eye on the chat here as we go. So feel free to toss in some chats and stuff like that. So welcome. Yeah. Who the hell am I is a great question. So I own 4 restaurants. That is my bread and butter. I started when I was 20 years old. Now, most people think, well, how did you start when you were 20 years old? Well, I was working part-time at this restaurant in the summer months, and it was busy and things were going good. And then the owner, who was Australian, was like, hey, I want to move back to Australia. He's having a daughter, wanted his daughter to have the right accent, because the Aussie accent's pretty cool. So he's like, hey, you want to buy this place? And I was like, sure. Like, I have no money. I have no experience. What could go wrong? And turns out a lot of things can go wrong when you're getting into a restaurant. You have no idea what you're doing. So within 3 months, we were almost bankrupt. So that's where I started. To give you an example, our sales were about $16,000 a month, and our rent alone was about $5,000. So we started out in a really, really rough spot. It took me a few years, but eventually we had tripled our sales. We had really learned how to run a restaurant, and then I opened up a second one, and then a third one, and I got to 3, and I was like, what was happening is I was putting out fires all day long. It was like, oh, somebody called in sick, I had to go and fill in. Oh, a piece of equipment broke, I had to go and fix it. Like, I remember I was married at the time, and I was literally trying to go and visit my wife's family, and literally we didn't even make it out of the city limits. And all of a sudden it was like, nope, somebody called in sick, and I had to turn the car around and go back. So I realized that at that point, even though we had done well with 1 location and 2 locations, I got to 3. And I didn't have the time to be able to focus on the business as much as I wanted to, because I was so busy inside the business. We didn't make the profits we want. We didn't have the sales we want. All of those things were a problem because I was spread so thin. And so what ended up happening is I then developed the systems to redo all of our hiring, all of our training, all of our, marketing efforts, our finance, everything you can imagine. We went back and revisited all of it and then fixed it to work for multiple units. And also so the restaurant owners, myself in this case, could have a life. And that became the stuff that I teach clients now. So I help clients free up their time so they can open up more locations. They can have time with their families, take vacations, build the bank account every single month, and just actually enjoy being a restaurant owner, because most of you guys probably feel burnout. But today, what we are diving into is finances. So in the chat, if everyone can either put in their prime cost from last week, or if you don't know it, just write, I'm not sure. So I want to see what we can get you guys to do. So your prime cost from last week, let's see how many people know what it is. I think I might have missed some of the chats. Salim is, I think, the first one that I have on my screen. I was in the hosts and panelists one, but.
Yep, he's the first one that popped in here.
Sweet.
As well.
All right. So no clue, 55%. Excellent. Anybody else want to throw their hat in the ring there? Either your prime cost, or if you don't know it, I don't know.
Daniel, Elizabeth, Priyanshu, Salim, Shauna, Camille. You guys know your prime cost? If you don't know your prime cost, just say you don't know, or just toss a number down there in the chat box. Prime costs, of course, would be food cost plus labor cost. So
exactly
in the chat box there, let us know what your prime cost is.
Okay. 45%. So So Daniel, what kind of concept do you have for your food and labor to be 45%? Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. All right. And do you have the breakdown between your food and your labor on that? Because what I'm going to show you next is a little diagram I do, which usually breaks down all the fun stuff in your numbers in a very, very simply and easy to understand way. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay. Does your 15% labor include your self or your management as well? Because 15% labor seems quite on the low side. But if that's accurate, awesome. All right, guys. So what I'm going to do is draw you a terrible drawing because I'm absolutely terrible at drawing. So you guys can see my screen okay? You can see my triangle? Awesome. So when we are evaluating restaurant finances, here are the things that we are working on. So number one is rent, because that's the thing you cannot control, right? What we like to see is rent costs typically between 8 to 12%. 12% is usually for more quick service, fast casual. 8% is more full serve. Now, depending on where you are, because there's some states who have much lower rent costs, which is great. Then again, in Canada, there's some higher numbers there as well. So 8 to 12% is a pretty good range. If you're below that, awesome, have at it. Now, the next two costs we like to monitor are obviously our food and our labor costs, which combine for our prime costs. And the number we're really, really looking for here is about 55%. Now, this is a really, really good number. Most clients that we see in most restaurant out there, I didn't want to take a guess at what their normal prime cost is. We have some of your guys right now, but just think about the average restaurant. Where do you think their prime costs are? 65. Okay. Any other thoughts?
Higher than it should be.
That's absolutely accurate. So normally when we're evaluating most restaurants, we see their costs somewhere in the 70 to 80% range. That's where most restaurants operate, believe it or not. Now, so let me take a look at this. Just imagine this. Say you have a restaurant that does 50% prime cost. I'm just using that number for easy math, versus one that does 75% prime cost. How many more sales, how much more in revenue do you think the 75% prime cost restaurant needs to do in comparison to the 50% restaurant? Because the math would say, oh, well, there's a 25% difference, so therefore it should be about 25%, right? That's kind of the easy math. But the reality is, to make the same net profit, a restaurant that does 75% needs to actually do double the sales to make the same amount of profit versus one that has prime costs around 50%. It's a big number. So most people come to us and they say, you know, Andrew, I can't afford to market. I don't have money to be able to do that. And we don't have money to pay more staff. We don't have money to do the things that we want. We're not making any money, even though we might have some decent sales. And the quickest way to put more money in your bottom line is actually reducing your prime cost, because it's really the only things that you can control very, very easily. We can influence our sales, but we know that takes time, money, and so on. Whereas what's happening in your restaurant, that can be changed very, very, very quickly and can add money to your bottom line. So the way that I like to explain this to people is that when we are able to bring their prime cost from, say, 75% down to 55%, once that happens, that literally saves them 20% of sales. So if you're doing $100,000 a month, that's $20,000. And then what we do with that is that can then fund your marketing to move them forward. Right? Because most people come in, they're like, oh, I don't have money. So Luke, let me ask you this. What would happen to most of your clients if tomorrow they were all able to double their ad budget?
Oh, that'd be amazing. They'd get a lot more butts and seats for sure.
Exactly. And so all of a sudden
And
people
a
are
lot
like,
more
well,
profit per, yeah, exactly.
exactly. They're just like, well, I don't have the money to do that. The way to get that money is to make sure you run a tight ship operationally and then start building up the sales. And that's what brings in the exponential profit. Does anyone know what my profit target goals are for restaurants versus most of the industry? Let's see if anyone can pinpoint this one. So again, profit goals for me versus profit goals for the industry as a whole, as a percentage. We got to put on the Jeopardy theme song in the meantime. Okay. So here's the deal. Most of you guys have said, 12% or 15%. The deal is most restaurant owners that are out there, the reality for them, 10% would be a dream. 10% profits would be a dream. And personally, I think that's absolute bullshit because we didn't get into this business for 10% profit margins, right? Most restaurant owners actually live pretty much at I don't want to say the poverty line, but it's like they make less than what their employees make per hour worked, right? So the thing is, my goal for the restaurants that we work with is having them at about a 20, 25% profit margin, right? Because that is something we can do something with. That is something where you can build a sustainable business over the long term and scale to multiple locations and actually create something that you can leave for your family, right? You can't do that off 10% margins. So that is what I like to see for the restaurants that we work with. Now, the industry as a whole, I would say more than half from the people that we talk to, and we talk to a lot of people, don't actually have any profits at all. And that's what keeps me up at night. That is a scary thing. Luke, I'm sure you hear that, from people coming in. Yeah, most don't make any money at all. So a lot of what we do with our clients is take them from, say, 0%, 5%, or 10% and help them turn that to 25%. That's the stuff that we do with our clients. Now, first thing to do is we need to be able to track our numbers because you can't change what you don't measure, right? So if you don't actually know what your food cost was last week, if you don't know what your labor cost was last week, even on the daily, you're not going to be able to make the changes that are needed to run a lean restaurant, right? So the first thing we want to do is make sure we are tracking all of our numbers. So what I did, and I will just share my screen again, I created this little spreadsheet and we've been giving it out for free to everybody for a long time. And so it's just really, really, really simple. So it looks like this. And so every single month, we've got it all laid out here. One of the easiest things to do is, okay, food sales typed in here as, 36.6. Their cost of goods sold, 12 grand, which brings their cost of goods to about 32%. Now their labor cost over here, again, is 21% because again, we put in our labor spent. We divided the alcohol up depending on your alcohol SKU and so on. But what it does is it gives us this handy dandy little prime cost over here. And we've defined prime cost. If it's below 55%, that's green. 55 to 65% is yellow. Anything above 65% is in the red. We need to make sure that we change that. And so this is really, really simple. Here's the way that we do it. Every single week, I get my management team literally to take all the invoices because they come in throughout the week. They put them in one spot. At the end of the week, they literally just grab a calculator, grab their invoices, add them up, plop them in here. Simple as that. They can tell what their labor is. They can tell what their food is. They can factor in inventory if they want to. But the point is, we will have a pretty good idea of what our numbers are on a weekly basis. So let me ask you guys another question is, how many of you guys get profit and loss reports every month? Just say yes or no if you get them every month. Yes, yes, yes. Excellent. That's exactly what we want to see. I would say that most restaurant owners out there, they do not get profit and loss statements every single month. Most people we come across are like, a what? Oh, I need to have an accountant. And I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me. This is a very, very basic thing that we need everyone to have. So being able to track your numbers is extremely important. Now, if you ever have an issue with labor, for example, I suggest even tracking it daily, because my team literally tracked the labor multiple times per day. And then the manager reviews it the next day to make sure they were in compliance, right? Because most people don't get it, but 1% on $1 million in revenue per year is how much? It's 10 grand, right? 1%. If your labor is over by 1%, most people don't think anything of it. Oh, well, we'll get it down next week. Oh, we'll get it down 2 weeks from now. But that 1% adds up to 10 grand on $1 million of sales. If you have 3 locations all doing the same, it's $30,000. It's a significant amount of money. And I don't know what you guys, but I would rather have that 30 grand in my bank account rather than say in the garbage because of wasted food costs, right? So weekly. Perfect. That's exactly what you want to do. So this is an easy spreadsheet that we do. And then over here on the monthly side, what we have is we get them to enter in all their data monthly. And it just starts to give us a little understanding of, okay, how is our sales growth? This one's up, 31.8, solid increase. Labor cost is down a little bit. Food cost down. Prime cost down, and the profit went from 6% to 19.42. I'd say it's a pretty good increase. I don't know about you guys. So let's just do the math on this for a second. Let's take a look at this. So 19.42 minus 6.07. So that's 13.35%. So we'll just do this. So that made them an extra $18,764. for 1 month. Times that by 12, looking at 225 grand. That is a significant difference when you get everything running together. And that's exactly what we want to have happen. So what I'll do is I can drop a link for this tracker. Also in there is just drop in your email. You can also join our Facebook group as well. We have tons of other trainings on not just this kind of stuff as well, but also hiring, manager hiring. There's operational stuff in there. There's everything you can think of. So let me just drop this link in the chat. Feel free to pop in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to a few other things here. All right.
Yeah, Andrew, and after the call as well, you can send me all these links, and then
Sweet.
I'll text them to everybody, email them to everybody again, so they've got all those after the call too.
Perfect. All right, just gonna drop it right here. Excellent. All right. Okay, perfect. So that is the link in there. If you get into our Facebook group, lots of free trainings, other things there. And I'm also going to give you another link at the very end of the call, again, if you want to schedule in a call with us to dive in there a little bit more. So let's take a look at the other things that I want to go over. Number one, we talked about tracking your numbers. That is the very, very first step, because if you don't know your numbers, you can't make the decisions to change them. And business is a numbers game. Most people get into restaurants because they love to cook. They think it might be a good business, but they don't necessarily have the financial skills. So the thing is, we need to make sure you're getting accurate reporting quickly to make decisions. And the other thing too is know what your targets are. So an easy way to do that is to take your entire year last year, or the last quarter, or last whatever the case is. If you take that, look at what your average of your food cost was, your average of your labor cost, and just shave 2 or 3% off of that and make that your new target, right? Because if you weren't tracking it and you weren't really, really trying to be efficient, then this would be an easy way to kind of shave a few percent off. Now, another question I get is, how do they bonus managers? That's another question I get too, because if you have multiple locations, or your business is, scaling enough where you do have managers in place, we want to incentivize them to be able to do this work even when you're not there. Because the goal for me and the people we work with is that the business should still run and make money even when the owner isn't there. We want to treat it as a true business. Now, you can work there, but we want you to be able to still make money even when you're in the Bahamas. You know what I mean? So one of the ways in which we do that is we take the average of our food and our labor costs. What we do is we make the target at least 2% lower. And then what I do is if the manager hits their food target, they get 0.5%. And if they hit their labor target, they get 0.5%. Now, it depends on your overall revenue. If your revenue is over 100K a month, obviously you might want to move these percentages down. But my managers can actually make up an extra 25%. Like they could get like literally an extra week's pay if they hit their numbers. And I am 100% okay with meeting that because I know if they met our costs, I'm happy to pay it because I know we made money. Right? I made them lean enough where they probably hit them maybe half the time, but they have to work at it. We shouldn't be giving bonuses if they don't have to work at it. But when I set my targets, I make sure it's already at least 2% below what we already do. So 1% for them, 1% for me, everybody's happy. Make sense? I can only see Luke, so I'm just going to assume everybody else is good. So if you do have questions, though, feel free to drop them in the chat and I will circle back around to them as well. Now, the next thing that I want to mention here is that you can't outmarket bad pricing. This is one of the most common things I see from restaurants. If your prices are too low, what's going to happen is your food and your labor is going to be over. And no matter how much sales you bring through that restaurant, it's not necessarily going to show on your bottom line, right? Because think about it this way. If you do have that 75% prime cost, and then you work with Luke does a great job, and you're able to bring in an extra 10 grand a month in sales, right? But 75% of that goes to just making the product, you're left with $2,500, right? $2,500 doesn't go that far considering, you have to cover your ad spend, you have to cover a lot of other things too. That $2,500 isn't going to go very far. So here's the thing. What if, again, you had that 55% prime cost, all of a sudden you brought in 10 grand a month, 5K is profit on your bottom line. Now that's something you can do something with, right? Because then you're like, okay, well, if I just add an extra $500 a month to my ad spend, I'd still end up with $4,500. That's a deal I would make every day. You know what I mean? So that's the thing we have to think about is that even with the best marketing, the best things, if you don't have your margins in control, you're never going to really get that profit growth and ultimately the marketing growth, because then you're going to be like, hey, we don't have enough money to continue marketing, which is crazy. We need to be able to market. That's part of what we should do every single day. That's a non-negotiable for my businesses. So you can't outmarket bad pricing. Now, here's the other thing too. When we're talking about food and labor cost, the biggest businesses never don't do the basics. How we do it, like we literally have people on our team that have had 200 employees at a time running restaurants that in total had 12, 13 million in volume, like per year. Literally, it is not a magic secret. The biggest businesses don't have magic secrets around this. It is just they do the basics really, really well. So let me talk to you a little bit about that. I can talk about portion control. It sounds like one of the most simple things, but it is literally one of the most skippable things in a business, right? Because all of a sudden we get focused on so many other priorities, and all of a sudden, all it takes is your frontline folks, they're adding a little bit of extra cheese to a pizza, they're adding an extra ounce of meat to a sandwich. I know there's a salad guy on here, maybe adding, double the protein on a salad. That's all going to add up as time goes on. So the thing is, it comes down to your portion control when it comes to food costs. Obviously, ordering is important. Obviously, making sure your prep waste, that's extremely important. But I've found in most restaurants, the biggest things, your profit is in the hands of each and every one of your employees. So here's an example. There's a pizza restaurant that we used to work with, and they first came in and they weren't portioning out any of their cheese. Oh, how much goes on a pizza? Oh, however much fits. And so then they tried to cost out their menu. And I'm like, okay, well, how much cheese do you put on a pizza? And they're like, well, we don't really know. We don't know how much it is. And I'm like, okay, well, what's your biggest cost from product? Oh, well, it's the cheese. The cheese is the biggest cost item on every pizza. And I'm like, so let me get this straight. Your biggest cost item, you do not control at all. And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, there's a problem here because pizza should have really good margins and you guys are running at like 40% food cost. There's a bit of an issue here. So what we got them to do is literally just figure out, okay, how many ounces should go on a large and a medium? And then we had their team literally just scoop the cheese and then put it on. So it provides consistency around it, right? Here's an example from my own business. So again, quick service sandwich shop is basically, my restaurant. So what we did is, and just a little bit older. So we had fax orders that came in. We've been doing this for a while. So we had fax orders that came in. And so what I did was one day I'm like, I want to see how my team does on portion control. So literally I just wrote down an order and on this little faxable form, and I got each employee to make it. I went up and said, hey, Luke, I need you to make this right now. Just take like 5 minutes and make this real quick because they're going to come pick it up. So they just made this sandwich, wrapped it up, put it in a bag. I said, sweet, I'm going to set this in the fridge and they're going to come pick it up. Nobody thinks about it. 10 minutes later, I grab another employee. Hey, can you make this order? And so I literally had every team member that we had make these orders, put them in the fridge. And then at the very end of the shift, I took them all out and I weighed every single one of them. So one of them was, say, 6 or 7 ounces. And then another one was 16 ounces. There's a big difference in between an identical sandwich, right? So that alone makes a huge difference on your bottom line. Another thing we do, literally my supervisors do this, my managers do this, we spot check protein portioning. Literally, we weigh out all of our meats, for example. And so one of the weekly checks for our management is to go in and take one portion from every bin that got prepped and weigh it to make sure it's at the proper weight. Same thing for cheese portioning. So we use a spoon for cheese portioning, but here's what some people do. Some people literally put their thumb on the cheese spoon. I know that actually costs 33% more in cheese when they put their thumb on so that it doesn't like fall. They'll scoop it and do this. 33%. That has a big impact because cheese is the second largest expense for us in food cost. Protein is number one, cheese is number two for us. That's a huge thing. That's literally thousands of dollars. Here's another story that I like to use about prep waste. I'm going to picture this as a cucumber. Okay. Most people and most employees, when they come in, how much do you think they chop off the cucumber? They probably chop off like here and here. They might leave like half an inch or an inch on either side they chop off. So Luke at home, I'm assuming that's probably what you would do if you were chopping a cucumber. You know what I mean?
Yep, exactly.
It's pretty normal.
Hopefully I don't get my finger in there.
Well, exactly. But here's the thing. All you really have to cut off is that tiny, tiny little nub. And so this is literally what happened. I walked into one of my stores one day and I saw this guy was literally chopping off like inch-long pieces of cucumbers and throw it in the garbage. And I'm just there like, okay, let's deal with this. So literally I grabbed all of the cucumbers that he chopped out of the garbage. And believe, like, we didn't use them, don't worry, but we set them beside everything. And I literally lined them all up. And out of a case of 12 cucumbers, that added up to be 2 full cucumbers, right? That he just chopped off for no other reason. We had paid for them. It was still good product, but he just chopped it all off because whatever, he wasn't paying attention, wanted to move fast, whatever excuse you could have. Point is, I did the math on that. So out of that case, it costs like $20 at the time or whatever. And say we went through 15 cases per week, times that by 52 weeks a year, it ended up being over $2,000 for cucumber waste. That's how much it ended up being because, out of, even if it was say 12 cases and there's 12 cucumbers in a case, then we would have wasted 2 cases a week. You know what I mean? Just in prep waste, little things like that. And when we're talking about restaurants, every little bit, you have to think of it being multiplied 100 times by every employee that you have, by every product that you have over the course of a year. The money is made in the small increments when it comes to controlling food costs. So portion control is very, very key. Same thing with labor. Another tool that we use as well is basically called a productivity calculator. So I can just like dig this up here for a second. Let me just find it. Now we do this to spot where our weak points are in our operation. So let me just share this here. Because labor, again, once an hour is gone, it's not like you go back to your employees and be like, hey, could I just not pay you for that? No, you've got to pay them. Once an hour is gone, the time's gone. So we literally have all of our people run this through. So say, for example, it's 11 o'clock, you did 300 in sales, for example, and you had 3 people on shift, that gives you a sales per person of 100. Once you start filling this out, you're going to notice that your team is capable of handling $100 per person or $200 per person at certain times. And then other times it's going to drop down to be like $25 a person, right? You're going to see a very, very big difference. And here's the thing. What a lot of people don't do is they don't change their schedule. I've seen this way too much where people just run the same schedule week after week after week. And it frustrates me every time because your sales change every week. And so too should your biggest costs, which are food and labor. That means you're going to order differently on a busy week versus a slow week. You're going to staff differently on that too during your peak season, your low season. So literally by doing this every single day for every single week, we can see where are the points that we want to cut as far as our scheduling goes so that we can start skimming a little bit, or we could even stagger some labor. So for example, instead of having everyone start at 10 and work 10 to 6 or whatever, we start one person at 10, then one person 11, one person at 12 based on the volume of the business. So that's just a really easy calculation to do just to make sure you're on top of labor. And here the other thing is that for my business, our managers and even our frontline staff members can actually make those cuts themselves. So they literally have a sheet that they fill out every day where they compute the sales per person. And there's a little metric that says, hey, if it's below this amount, send someone home an hour early. Hey, if it's busy, call someone in a little bit early. So literally my team will make those adjustments as they go every single week. Right? That's how we stay on top of it. Because the manager or me or whoever, we can't be there all the time. So we need our crew to do it even when they're not there. Sweet. So that was actually my next point, monitor labor daily. So another thing that we do is we have an internal manager chat with my team. Every single day, what they do is they tell me what the labor cost was the day before. They put that in there and they're like, okay, well, it was 32%. We need to bring it down. Or, oh, it was 22%. We need to make some covers there. Hey, it was 15%. We need to add some more because our target's actually 19%, for example. So they see that and they take action based on what's happening. So either they go out and try and bring in some more sales, or they will try and cut some labor, rearrange some shifts, whatever the case is, because we need to be on it every single day. That is the key to having an extremely profitable restaurant. Now, the last thing that I want to cover is something very tactical for all of you guys to do is understand the seasons of your business. So what I want to know from you guys right now is how many of you guys had some turnover and probably had to hire some people in the last 2 or 3 months? Just give me either hand raise or type it in the chat. Hey, no, I had some turnover in April, had to hire some people, hiring's been tough. Okay, we've got some hands going up. Absolutely. So here's the secret. That actually happens every year. The problem is we are so focused in our business sometimes. Oh, there's a change from winter to fall and summer and spring. We know that there's seasonal changes, but what we often don't understand is that we just don't understand what's happening in our business each and every time. So let me give you an example of that. So most of you guys, your sales will go up in spring, right? That's a very, very normal pattern. Okay. The issue is that for whatever reason, because spring follows winter, we typically don't hire early enough. There's what we call a hiring dead zone in about April and May. And so that's where more people no-show for interviews. There are fewer people in the labor market because school is changing a little bit. The college gets out, people are going to pick up their kids, people are changing jobs. And it might not be your restaurant necessarily that maybe you don't have people in that demographic that you're hiring, but everyone else does, right? The Walmarts and grocery stores and retail and everyone, they all revolve around that. And so it's a rather large piece of the labor market that changes. All of a sudden, 2 weeks before college gets out, everybody gives in their notice because they've got exams, right? And then they finish And then they usually wait 2 or 3 weeks before they find a job because they want to enjoy a little bit of summer before they do that, right? So what that means is usually in April and May, what happens? Sales go up, which means you need more staffing, but the pool in the labor market goes down. So all of a sudden, that means you're going to have a really hard time finding people. And even the people you do hire, they exit faster. Sometimes you'll get more churn in your first 2 or 3 weeks. It's going to be a lot harder to hire the right people. And most people get thrust back down into the business because they don't have enough staffing. That's what happens. Why is this important? Because guess what? The springtime is your peak profitability time of year. And most people get sucked down to the business. So what do they stop doing? They stop marketing. Oh, I don't have time to focus on that. I don't have time to focus on that. I don't have time to work with my servers to encourage them to upsell. I don't have time to monitor my numbers because I'm just too busy. I had to fill a shift and this person called in sick and this person quit and I've got to train this person tomorrow night and I don't even have time to sleep or have time with my family. So we are not then doing the things that we need to do in our business because we didn't understand the seasons. So what you need to do instead is when January rolls around, okay, I need to start thinking about spring hiring. By the time February rolls around, you should probably hire a couple of people. That way they get into training. I know it's slow and people are often very reactive to where they're at in that current moment. So they're like, oh, I can't hire, because sales are lower and stuff like that. But then I ask them, I'm like, okay, so when do sales go up? They say, oh, well, it normally goes up in March. Okay, great. How long does it take you to hire people? Oh, about 2 weeks. Okay, great. How long does it take you to train them? Oh, 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, so that's 6 weeks in total. And we're the 1st of February now. And mid-March is when sales start to go up. So that means by the time you hire and train people, it will be mid-March. So most people are scared of a problem that doesn't even exist, right? The point I want to make here is when you know your seasons, you can capitalize on them and still remain the business owner, because then you can still focus on controlling your costs. You can focus on controlling your labor. You can focus, well, here's the other thing too, by hiring in off-peak seasons, your training cost is a lot less, right? Because fewer people are turning over, fewer people are quitting, right? And a more efficient staff will always be lower on labor cost. And if you know that in advance, you can capitalize on it instead of being caught by it and then only somehow managing to get back to normal by the time you hit June and July. Well, guess what? There's more turnover that happens in August and September. So you're right back to it. And then September, October, you're just trying to get back to normal, just trying to dig your way out of the business, just trying to get set. And all of a sudden your sales have gone down and all of a sudden you're freaking out because like, well, what do I do? Because the best time to plan a marketing campaign, as Luke can attest to, is before you need it. Best time to do winter marketing and plan winter marketing is in November. If you want to do marketing in January and February, because it takes time to get ad creatives, it takes time to do a lot of other things. You need to be doing that late fall. That's how you become a really proficient business owner, is by understanding your seasons, knowing what's coming and getting ahead of it. And I will tell you that 95% of business owners do not do this. That's why when you drive down the street every single April, every single May, you're going to see every place put out these road signs. Now hiring, desperate for hiring. That's where you hear people saying, oh, people don't want to work anymore. You hear all of this stuff. And it always happens right around April and May, happens again in September. It's all because of those seasons. And so if you can hire outside of those, you're going to be in a much better place and you're going to have the capacity to be able to focus on the big things in your business, like monitoring your numbers. So if there's any advice I can give you, that is the biggest one, because for me, it took me 10 years to figure it out. But once I did, my business was never the same. It used to be like clockwork. Every September, all of my managers would come to me crying. Literally, like, it's so stressful. I can't hire. I can't do this. And then one day we're like, oh, well, let's just hire in July so we have enough people for September. Since then, it's been great. And then we can actually focus on capitalizing on driving sales and profitability in that time when everyone else is just focused on survival. Awesome. So that is what I wanted to cover today. There's a few quick tips in there, just a few things to think about for me, who sees hundreds and hundreds of restaurants every year, who owns for himself. These are the things that we focus on. If we have a profitability problem, this is where we start. I know it probably doesn't sound like it's crazy and really, really sophisticated, because guess what? The basics are what works. Don't get fancy, just do what works. It comes down to 1 hour at a time, one plate at a time. Those are the things that make the biggest difference. And it's our ability to get our team to do that day in, day out that makes the big difference.
I love it. Andrew, thank you. That was extremely valuable. If I may add just a few thoughts, I think one of the biggest thing that resonated with me was tracking the boring stuff, right? Tracking the little things. Your example around having 12 cucumbers and then cutting off the little knobs, and all those little knobs actually made, 2 extra cucumbers. It's a good example of things that can be found anywhere throughout the business. And I can attest to this as well. When I look through my P&Ls, I'm like, I don't know if we need this software. I don't really know if we need that license. And I'm like, oh, all these things, boom, there's an extra 5-7% profit margins just right there. So, wow, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing these things. That really stood out to me, that just tracking the small stuff, tracking the boring stuff. I think that's huge. And then, like you said, just tracking it to start with, right? If you don't track it, you're never really going to know those things. So, I think that we should open it up for some questions for some people here on the call. Before we do some questions, I want to encourage everybody. If you guys want some of Andrew's help from his team, and you want to have like a one-on-one call with him, I would encourage you to schedule a time with him. Andrew, maybe if you could throw a link down here in the chat, and we'll get that to you after the call as well, so you can schedule with him. Andrew's company's awesome. They'll hold like a free consultation with you where you can have a call with them. See if they can actually help you. There's like no pressure, no obligations. You can just have a free call, and they'll kind of walk you through a few things one-on-one and see if there's a fit, see if they can actually help you if you want some of this stuff.
So I just dropped the link. It just so you know, that's my direct link. So it's not to my team, but literally just to me direct. So feel free to use that, but please don't share it because my calendar doesn't have that much time on it. But yeah, just for you guys, that's direct to me.
Awesome. Yeah, so I would encourage everybody to schedule a call if you want some help in these fields. And if anybody has any questions right now, I would say go ahead and ask them. And we've got about 10-15 minutes left for some questions. So if you have any questions, you can just type them in the chat box right below here. Yep. You can also, there's a little raise hand icon. You can click the raise hand icon in Zoom, or you can just type in here, say, I want to talk, and we can unmute you. Everybody's on mute just to protect the background noise. But if you have any questions, I would encourage you to ask away. We've got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah. Anything you guys want to know. Doesn't necessarily have to be just financial. Could be anything, hiring, operations, anything that you guys can think of. Happy to share it while I'm here.
I've got a question while people are maybe typing theirs or thinking of their questions. How do you usually run your one-on-one calls? Like when someone books a call to you, is it like you're asking a few questions around their business and see if there's anything you can, like any gaps you can find in the approach? 100%. Or I guess how do you come up to see if you can help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I hop on the call with someone, I just want to get a sense of basically what they're trying to accomplish and where they're at right now. And for most people, there are a few little things, and I'm a big believer in finding the little hinges that swing big doors is the way that I would kind of really look at it. So for some people, they come in and they're like, hey, sales are great, but I have no life. We're making great money. We're making 20-25% profit margins, but I work 80 hours a week and I want a life. I'm like, great. Let's dive into the few things we can do in a few months that will dramatically change that. So usually in a call, I'll just ask a few questions, get a sense of where things are at and where you want to go. For some people, it's, hey, I want to open up multiple locations. I've got one right now. How do I get to 2? What are the things that I'm going to encounter along the way that I need to be ready for? For some people, it's 4 going to 7, but it just depends on where people are at. But that's exactly it. It's usually 15, 20 minutes-ish. We get a good understanding of where things are at. And obviously, if we can help, and, in the event that there's not a fit, I'll just send you a whole bunch of resources that can help you on the way, and you can implement them on your own.
Love that. Awesome. Cool. Guys, if you have any questions, feel free to put in the chat. Andrew's been super thorough, so I guess no questions might be a good thing. That's awesome too. But we'll wait around for a few minutes, see if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, I just wanted to, Andrew, again, thank you for joining the call. I think that you've dumped a ton of value here, so really do appreciate that.
Great question. We've got, what do you think about video training programs for staff? I think they are amazing as a first step. So here's the thing. We think as leaders and managers that we tell someone something once and they should just know it, right? And be able to execute it. The reality of it is something very, very different. The reality is that people only retain about 10% of what they hear, right? But I believe the stats are people will retain 30% of what they do and 50% of what they teach. Something along those lines. There's like a skew that goes along. So if you want to create some consistency in your team, having a video is a great place to start, but it will still fail if you actually don't have good management to hold people accountable. So let me tell you a little bit of a story. So here's something that happens. Someone might get trained properly. And we always hear this between openers and closers, right? So somebody comes in, we train this great closer. And then what happens is they get really, really busy one night. They sign a couple of things off that aren't fully done. And then no one gives them any feedback on it. So they're like, oh, sweet. Whew. I escaped, we're good. And so then, they go back to doing their normal stuff, the next few days, but then it gets really, really busy. They're getting out late. They're like, oh, I just want to go home. I'm tired. So they sign a few things off that maybe aren't quite done. Nobody says anything. Whew, escaped again. And the next night they're like, oh, I'm just a little tired tonight, so I'm not going to do all the stuff again. And then it slowly goes down again and again and again. And so what we really want to make sure happens is we really just want to make sure that we have the management that are checking up. You want to inspect what you expect. That's a very common phrase that gets used a lot. We just need to make sure that what we need to get done gets done. Now, here's another thing too. Even if you train someone properly, I kid you not, this actually happened to a friend of mine who owns a restaurant in a different part of the country. But basically what happened was they would empty the grease trap in a grease receptacle, right? What would end up happening is one day he came in and walked into the bathroom and there was like black sludge on the toilet. And he's like, did someone die? Like, what happened? Like, what is that? Like, should I be calling the health department? Like, what the heck? Anyway, so then he asked the closer, he's like, hey man, there's just like black stuff on the toilet. He's like, oh yeah, that's just where I was dumping the, the excess from the grill, the scrapes from the grill, from the grease trap after cleaning it. And he's like, you realize that could end up clogging the plumbing. We could get fined from the city. We'd literally have to dig up our, cement slab and then replace the plumbing. Like that could be a major, major issue. Why did you start doing it that way? And he's like, oh, I just thought it would be a better way to do it. So circling back to video training programs, that is a great first step. But not only is there a learning curve, but there's also a forgetting curve. And so videos are a great starting point, but it will never replace proper management and proper on-site training by your people. Great resource to have because you can refer people back to it, but never use that to go in place of actual management and actual live training and getting them to do it. Instead, what I like to do for training is a 3-step training method. The training method is number 1, show them what to do. Number 2 is tell them why. Okay. And then the third one is follow up. And the key to this is that the follow up never ends. Right? The follow up will never end. We always want to ensure compliance. Okay, awesome. So let's talk about a couple other questions here. So video training programs, talk about that. Best way to control scooping. I mean, realistically, the way that I would look at it, if you really want to get, it just depends on what you're scooping, but if you really want to find out what people are actually doing, get them to scoop it, and then be like, oh, hold on a second, let's weigh that to see what it comes out to. But the best way to do it, if you're doing scooping, I try and make it as idiot proof as possible. And not because people are idiots, but if you try and do like a level scoop of something, a level scoop is really hard to change. You know what I mean? It's either level or it's not. Whereas if you take a spoon, it's like a heap. Is it a big heap? Is it a small heap? Is it there's room for inconsistency there. So the least amount of inconsistency that you can have in your operation, the better you're going to be. The more you can make things idiot proof, and again, because common sense isn't common to someone who's never done it before, the more systematic you can make it, the better you're going to be on that. So that's what my view is. Okay, let's see what's next here. System, a checklist, ensure the staff is always committed to always following it. It actually goes right back to what I was talking about. So number one, you want to make sure, well, actually, let me tell you a story. So when I had 2 locations, I was going between them, making sure everything got done properly. I had my little checklist that I would go over, do a little store evaluation. And so I went in, and one day I walked into the bathroom, and the mirror was like streaky or foggy. It was like they had tried to clean it, but they used the wrong product, and almost looked like it would have been better if they didn't even try and clean it at all. Right. So I go in there and I'm like, what the heck is this? So I then go over to our close list and I'm like, okay, Sarah was the one who closed. Okay, Sarah, you got to make sure that you use Windex and paper towel because, it's got to be clean and it's foggy right now. And then I went in, I brought all the staff in to fix it. And, I said, guys, people judge our kitchen cleanliness based on our bathroom cleanliness. We got to do a better job. And then I fixed it myself because I was a hands-on owner. I'm sure none of you guys have ever done that before. So I went to my next location and just take a wild guess what I found. Well, guess what? I found the exact same thing. And so I'm thinking to myself, how can we be focused on growing our sales and growing our profits if we can't clean a mirror? So what we did is we changed our checklist from saying clean bathroom mirror. We changed it to say clean bathroom mirror with Windex and paper towel. Literally, we have to make it so easy for people to understand that if they ever don't do it properly, we just go to that checklist and say, hey, was there anything confusing about that? And they're like, well, no. Great. So that's the way it needs to get done, and then we can hold them accountable to the standard. So one of the biggest things is once that first step is in place, once we have the standards that we expect, then the next piece is holding them accountable to it. Right. So we follow up. Hey, man, so I noticed that this didn't get done last night. Just want to make sure we get it done because when you didn't do this, someone else had to do it. They had to stay late. And like, that's not fair. Right. Next time. Hey, so I know we talked about this. Was there anything preventing you from being able to do this task properly last night? Okay, well, let's make sure we get it done next time. Third time, it's like, hey, man, so we've talked about this a couple times. This didn't get done. What do we need to do to make sure that this happens in the future? That's the third conversation. Fourth conversation is like, okay, so this is a verbal warning. We need to make sure that this gets done. This is why it is a serious issue. If it continues, we will not be able to keep your employment here. I just wanted to let you know how serious this is. And then after that, we go down the road to termination. But the thing you need to have is the clarity of expectation. We need to make sure they know how to do it, can do it. You've witnessed them. You've done your part. Once you have done that, then the rest is up to them. They either pick up the ball and run with it or they don't. And then you have to change them out, right? Most people view their workplace as a family. I heard this literally last night on a TikTok. Most workplaces view themselves as a family, but you actually need to view yourself as a professional sports team. If you're going to win the Super Bowl, you're not going to keep on someone who can't catch the ball running downfield, right? If they fumble it every single time, you're not going to keep them on the lineup. You're going to switch them out because the goal is winning. Right. So that's how we have to view our people as well. Give them every chance, help them as much as you can, do all of your part. At the end of the day, you need people that perform so you can achieve your goals for the business. Okay. So how can I retain employees who work for this company while the food allowances come out? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by food allowances. Can you just clarify that a little bit?
Miguel, if you could clarify the question, that'd be great. Andrew, while he's doing that, I think just one thing to add around what you talked about is, and this is something that I experience every day too. I think if we leave any room for error, in all of our processes. For example, like your mirror cleaning example around clean the mirror. Well, now it can be cleaned with like anything. But if you have clean the mirror with paper towels and Windex, there's not really any room for error there. So I think if, and I've experienced this in my business too, if we leave room for error or if we leave room for interpretation, there's just going to be mistakes and it's just inevitable. So I think like thinking about the processes kind of like a machine, that like the machine, the nuts and bolts are really, there's no room for error there. And I think that's a good way to think about the like the processes too, is having like, if you're going to have room for error, it's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's the thing. People will make up their own interpretation unless you take away that part of it. If you make sure there's a clarity around it, there's not a lack of clarity. Because here's the thing, when you hire people, they wouldn't have been raised like you or me or someone else, right? There's not going to be this shared experience anymore. 50 years ago, most people might have had a similar upbringing and stuff like that. That's not the case anymore. And that's totally okay. You just can't assume that the person you've hired knows how to mop a floor. They may never have mopped a floor in their entire life before. People could have 3 years experience as a server and still be a terrible server, right? Like it is possible for those things to happen. So your job is to make sure that you've eliminated all of those risks and that lack of clarity around it. So the only thing that is left is their ability to perform within a quick amount of time.
Yeah.
So I'm still a little bit fuzzy on this question. So how can I retain employees who work for this company while the food allowances come out the health department license? Oh, okay. So I'm thinking, so you're not open yet. Okay. Is that the case? Is that you're not open yet? You're trying to retain people in the meantime?
Let me scroll up to see if
So
there's more messages.
got it. Okay, perfect. So, I mean, the biggest thing you can do is, again, it depends on the amount of time. So, for example, like anytime that I have an opening, I know that, okay, we have a launch date, we have a construction date, health department approvals on this date. And so we typically start, when I have multiple locations and still do, I would train people at a different location. So that way they could get practice and then we opened up really, really strong. But if you only have one and you don't have that option, I would start hiring people usually about 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. And so you start to get them a little bit of practice, but at the end of the day, there's not much you can do to really fully train them until you're open for operations. Just because, you don't want to be making a ton of product that is not useful. So you could get them in the habit of it, and like learning a few things. But the main training we would do in that instance would be the week before when we're prepping up the business. And we also do a soft opening. And so a soft opening is a couple of things that we would do. With a soft opening, we would invite all of the VIPs in the area, all the politicians, the Chamber of Commerce. We would invite all the friends and family of the staff who are working. We'd invite any influencers we could. And literally, we would have them come in and we wouldn't charge them $1. We wouldn't charge them anything to come in and eat. We'd have them eat for free. We would make a whole bunch of stuff on the menu. And what we would do instead is do a charity partnership. So say the local food bank, we wanted to support them. Hey, instead of paying us, you can make a donation to the local food bank. And by doing so, that just generates a lot of goodwill. Then the charities talk about you and then it hypes up your openings. If you had VIPs coming in, having a great time, you could have a little, selfie booth, for example. There's a lot of things you can do, but it also gives experience for your team as well. And so what I always suggest doing is doing a soft opening and then actually don't do a ton of marketing in your first few weeks. You actually just want to get founded first and make sure you can execute the product okay, make sure that stuff is going okay, and then hit the ad switch, right? Because then you want to start driving traffic once you can handle it. Because the last thing you want to do is bring people in who come in and then never come back because they had a bad experience. So I always make sure we try and get them there first. Now, as far as retention, I mean, you could pay them during that time, but I think at least if you know the dates of when it's coming, you can then make sure you do it at the right time because timing is everything around that. There was another question, checklist, digital or paper. I'll be totally honest. What we use is we literally use a laminated sheet and they use a whiteboard marker to sign off on it. Very, very simple. You can, come in, check it over the next day. I do like digital. However, if you do have a, tablet or whatever that they have to sign off on it or take pictures of, that's a really cool compliance tool. The issue that you can get in with that is if you don't have a device that's there at work that they use, then all of a sudden people are tempted to use their phones, or they, well, that kind of introduces that. I do like digital, but the other thing I say too is in some cases, I mean, I've got 4 locations and we still use literally a laminated piece of paper and a whiteboard marker, and we still get it done. You know what I mean? So it's not even about the method rather than your management, because all of a sudden, if someone goes through and they hit the digital checklist, yes, we did this, even if it forces them to take a picture of the task being done, and they just like take a picture of something else and you don't check up on it, then it's still going to end up with the same thing. So above all of those systems is actually the management accountability system that makes them all work. No matter which way you go, it's the management and inspecting what you expect. That's what gets the compliance in line. Because let me ask you this. Say, for example, if you're in high school, I was a teacher, and I said, hey, this is English class. You're going to need to do 5 30-page essays by the end of the year. But guess what? I'm not going to grade them. You're going to get an A no matter what you do. I'm not even going to look at them when you turn them in. How many papers do you think the students are going to turn in at the end of the year? Not very many, right? But when all of a sudden you say, hey, I'm going to grade them really, really hard, it's got to be on time, or you get a 0, you're going to get a lot more compliance from it. So if people know that what they're doing is important and it's going to be looked over, they're going to do it differently. That's just the reality of human nature.
I love that. Well, guys, we've reached the top of the hour. So thank you, Andrew, for joining us. You've just dumped so much value on us, and I've taken a lot from this as well. So thank you
Awesome.
for coming on. And as a reminder for anybody on here, if you want to schedule a call one-on-one with Andrew, you can do that. We will follow up with you via text and email with links to all the things that we had covered today. So that's it for the webinar, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this stuff. If you have anything else any last words that you can share them right now.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing, watch your numbers day to day and know the seasons of your business, so you never get sucked down to the weeds and you can still remain in the business owner's seat. Most important things you can do.
Awesome. I love it all. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next week. And thank you, Andrew. We'll follow up with you as well. All right.
All right.
You
Bye,
guys.
guys.
Bye.